The temperature was hovering near 100 degrees for days across the South Carolina Midlands, but the afternoon of May 31st, 1985, was clear and bright. The sky a vivid, unbroken blue. 17-year-old Sharon Faye Smith, known to everyone as Shari, moved through the day at the pace her life demanded that spring. She and her classmate Andy Owen had been selected to sing the national anthem at their Lexington High School graduation that Sunday, at the University of South Carolina's Carolina Coliseum. There was a pool party at a friend's house near Lake Murray. Travelers' checks to pick up at the bank for a senior cruise to the Bahamas the following week. Her boyfriend, Richard Lawson, had been with her through most of it. Around 3:05 p.m., he watched her turn down Highway 1 toward home and drove on. The Smiths lived 10 miles outside of Lexington on Platte Springs Road in a house Bob Smith had built on 20 acres in a community called Red Bank. The driveway ran 750 feet from the road up to the house. Shari, as she always did, stopped at the mailbox before continuing up. Her mother, Hilda, glanced out the window around 3:25 p.m. and saw the blue Chevette parked near the road. She told her husband Shari was home. Minutes passed. The car didn't move. Bob Smith went to his own car, drove down the driveway, and called out for his daughter. She was not there. The driver's door was open. The engine was running. On the front seat were her purse, her towel, her black jelly shoes. Inside the purse was her medication, vasopressin, taken by nasal spray for the rare endocrine disorder she had, diabetes insipidus, which prevented her body from regulating fluid balance and required daily management. Shari never went anywhere without it. In the dirt near the mailbox, bare footprints led from the car to the box. None led back. According to Rita Shuler, a SLED forensic photographer who worked the case from its opening hours, Lexington County Sheriff James Metz immediately organized the largest search in South Carolina history. Air teams were called in, and the Emergency Preparedness Division of the Governor's Office set up a tractor-trailer operations center in front of the Smiths' house, equipped with radios and 24-hour telephone coverage. Volunteers arrived across the weekend. The temperature stayed near 100 degrees. Witnesses who had been on Platte Springs Road during the critical window described a vehicle stopping at the Smiths' mailbox shortly after Shari arrived. One witness, Mrs. Terry Butler, described looking directly at the driver of the car, a white male, clean-shaven, with receding thin hair after he had drifted into her lane. She watched his brake lights come on and his car pull off the road near the mailbox. Two other males traveling the same road in the same window reported seeing a reddish-purple 82 or 84 Oldsmobile Cutlass stop in the same location. SLED prepared a facial composite from Butler's description. Shari was not seen again. The Smiths did not know it yet, but she was already dead. 2 days into the disappearance, at 2:20 in the morning, on Monday, June 3rd, the telephone in the Smith house rang. Hilda Smith answered. A male voice, muffled and disguised, told her they would be receiving a letter in the mail that day from Shari. He described the clothing Shari had been wearing when last seen, specific enough to prove he had her. He told her the letter would be on a yellow legal pad and would bear the date June 1st, 1985. He said authorities were looking in the wrong place and that Sheriff Metz should go on television at 7 a.m. and call off the search. He ended the call. Mrs. Smith took notes. The call was not recorded, but telephone records, according to Shuler's account in Murder in the Midlands, traced it to a payphone outside Taylor's store on Highway 378, about 12 miles from the Smith home. The caller was gone by the time officers arrived. No identifiable prints were found. That same morning, Postmaster Thomas Roof was woken before dawn and met officers at the Lexington post office around 4 a.m. They sorted through the incoming mail and found a letter addressed to the Smith family. It had been postmarked June 1st, 1985 in Columbia. It bore a 22-cent mallard duck commemorative stamp. There was no return address. The address of the Smith family had been written on a small loose-leaf notepaper sheet, which had then been pasted to the envelope. Inside were 2 sheets of blue-lined yellow legal paper. At the top of the first page, Last Will and Testament, dated June 1st, 1985, at 3:10 a.m. Lieutenant Mickey Dawson of SLED's Question Document Unit examined the letter and compared the handwriting to known samples of Shari's. He positively identified it as hers. The letter, written in the final hours of her life, told her family how much she loved them. It asked them not to let any of this ruin their lives. It asked them to keep living, one day at a time, for Jesus. It noted in parentheses, casket closed. Bob Smith later told investigators he had a helpless feeling come over him when he read it, but held on to hope until the end. That word, casket, knocked him back. He did not know what to do or say. Then he had to show it to his wife. A recording device was placed on the Smiths' phone line that Monday. It was not removed. That afternoon, at 3:08 p.m., the caller rang again. He spoke first to Dawn Smith, Shari's 21-year-old sister, who had come down from Charlotte, where she was performing at Carowinds amusement park. He then asked to speak to Hilda. The caller asked whether they had received the mail. She told him she wasn't sure she believed him, and he said they would know in 2 or 3 days. Hilda asked about Shari's condition, because Shari had the water diabetes as the family knew it, and without medication she could dehydrate rapidly. He told her Shari was drinking a little over 2 gallons of water per hour and using the bathroom right afterward, but that he was giving her lots of water. The caller told her to call off the search. He said there was no money demanded. The call ended abruptly when she asked about the disease. That call was traced to an outside pay station at Eckerd's Pharmacy in the Lexington Town Square shopping centre, about 7 miles from the Smith home. The caller was gone. That Monday evening, at 8:07 p.m., he called again. This time he spoke at length. He verified details from the letter. He told Hilda Smith that Shari had written what they received at 3:10 a.m. on June 1st. He then corrected himself. 4:58 a.m. Saturday, the 1st of June. Paused and started again. He told them to look in Saluda County, closest to the Lexington County line within a 15-mile radius. He said one final thing before the line went dead. I want to tell you one other thing. Shari is now a part of me physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Our souls are one now. This call was traced to a public payphone at the intersection of Interstate 20 and Highway 204, about 8 miles from the Smith home. Again, he was gone. 4 days after the abduction, on June 4th at 9:45 p.m., the caller rang again and provided what investigators later described as a script of actual events and times. He recounted, in specific terms, the moment of the abduction, 3:28 p.m. on Friday, May 31st, from the mailbox at gunpoint. He told them she had the fear of God in her. Then he gave the corrected time of her letter, that slip again, where he moved from 3:10 to 4:58 and described what had become of her in terms the family would not understand until later. She had become one soul with him. God had chosen them. He said they would receive last-minute instructions where to find us. Hilda Smith broke in, "Do not kill my daughter, please." He told them to get good rest that night, and the line went dead. Dawn Smith later said in trial testimony, "He's gone, Mama." On the morning of June 5, 1985, 5 days after Shari's abduction, the phone rang at the Smith home at 11:54 a.m. A voice, clipped and precise, gave directions. Highway 378, west to the traffic circle. Prosperity exit, 1.5 miles. Turn right at the sign for Masonic Lodge number 103. Go a 1/4 mile, turn left at a white-framed building. Go to the backyard, 6 feet beyond. We're waiting. God chose us. The call lasted seconds. It had been placed through a Camden Highway switch station approximately 45 miles from Lexington. Sled crime scene investigators drove to the location. Shari's body was found in the backyard of the Masonic Lodge in Saluda County, 16 miles from her family's home, 6 to 10 feet into a wood line. She was wearing the yellow tank top and white shorts she had been wearing when she left the lake party. Her necklace from Richard was still around her neck. One gold stud earring remained in her left ear. Other jewelry was missing. She was barefoot. Forensic pathologist Dr. Joel Sexton arrived and examined the body. Because of the extreme heat, temperatures remained near 100 degrees for days. Decomposition and insect infestation were significant. The preliminary examination suggested Shari had been dead for at least 2 days, most probably since the morning after she was taken. Dr. Sexton later conducted the autopsy at Newberry Memorial Hospital. The cause of death was left undetermined by the pathologist, noting that the autopsy findings of asphyxia were consistent with several possibilities, including smothering or soft ligature strangulation. Because Shari had the water diabetes and was deprived of her medication, extreme dehydration leading to cardiac arrest was also a viable cause. The manner of death was ruled homicide regardless, as it occurred during abduction. Sled Captain Leon Gask returned to the Smith home to deliver the news. The family had been watching for his car. They saw him walk slowly to the door, and they asked if he was sure it was Shari. He replied, "Yes, it's Shari." That night, at 8:57 p.m., the caller rang the Smith house one more time. The operator announced a collect call from Shari Faye Smith, and Dawn accepted the charges. The caller, now speaking of Shari in the past tense, described how she died. Tied to a bedpost with electrical cord, she did not struggle or cry. He took duct tape, wrapped it all the way around her head, and suffocated her. The coroner should be told. He didn't know about the rare disease, he said, and it got out of hand. She did not cry the entire time, very strong-willed, not scared, because she knew she was going to be an angel. He could not live with what he did, and believed he would be dead before morning. He asked Dawn to forgive him. Dawn kept him talking, asking about her sister's ring, about his whereabouts, about his car. He described nearly being caught at Jake's Landing, pulling out 20 yards ahead of flashing lights that didn't follow him. The car was red and he was armed, but by the time they found him, he would not be dangerous. "I'm not going to be caged up like a dog." He called himself a family friend. He could not face them. The call lasted nearly an hour, and it was traced to a truck stop at the intersection of Interstate 77 and Highway 200 in Great Falls, South Carolina, roughly 50 miles from the Smiths' home, halfway between Columbia and Charlotte. He was gone. The caller did not commit self-checkout, though. He called again the following day. On the evening of June 7th, Sharry's visitation was held at the funeral home. Law enforcement videotaped everyone who entered. The killer, according to a phone call he made 2 days later, attended. He later told Dawn Smith that a uniformed officer directed him into a parking space. The casket was closed as Sharry had requested in her letter. On Saturday, June 8th, at 11 a.m., the funeral was held at Lexington First Baptist Church. Officers videotaped the graveside service. At the graveside, someone in the crowd called out Sharry's name. That same Saturday afternoon, at 2:21 p.m., the caller rang the Smith house from a racetrack service station in Augusta, Georgia, out of state for the first time. He was at the funeral, he told Dawn. He could not turn himself in as promised because he was afraid. He filled in what he called gaps and told her to set her alarm for 4:58 a.m. the following Saturday, the 1-week anniversary of Sharry's death, when he would call and give instructions for where to find him. Before hanging up, he said, "Dawn, your time is near." 6 days of silence followed. Then, on June 14th, at 4:07 p.m., almost 2 weeks to the hour after Sharry Smith was taken, it happened again. 9-year-old Deborah May Helmick was playing in the front yard of her family's trailer at the Shiloh Mobile Home Park in Richland County, 24 miles from the Smith home. She was with her 3-year-old brother, Woody. Her 6-year-old sister, Becky, rode to work with their mother. A neighbor 4 trailers down, Ricky Morgan, was in his kitchen when he looked out the window and saw a white male get out of a car parked in front of the Helmick trailer, grab Deborah May around her waist from behind, and run back to the car. She was screaming and kicking. Her feet could be seen hitting the roof of the car's interior as she was thrown across the seat. The car accelerated and exited the park. Morgan ran toward the Helmick trailer, and he got within 40 feet of the car before it cleared the lot. He saw a South Carolina license plate. The first letter was D. He then ran to alert the Helmick family. Sherwood Helmick was inside, 20 feet away, and heard what he thought were children playing. According to the Supreme Court of South Carolina's 1990 opinion in State v. Bell, investigators immediately worked with Morgan to develop a composite sketch. He described the man as a white male, 30 to 35 years old, 5 feet 9, 215 pounds, with a beer belly, closely cropped brown beard, and mustache and brown receding hair. Morgan described the car as a silver-grey 1982 or 83 Grand Prix, or Monte Carlo with red racing stripes. Officers were stationed at the Helmick trailer around the clock in hope that the killer would make contact with them as he had with the Smiths. He did not call. 8 days after Deborah May's abduction, at 12:17 a.m. on June 22nd, 14 days since the caller had last spoken to the Smiths, the phone rang at the Smith home again. Dawn answered. The caller identified himself obliquely, verifying his identity through details of earlier calls. He then said, "God wants you to join Sharry Faye. It's just a matter of time. This month, next month, this year, next year. You can't be protected all the time. Have you heard about Deborah May Helmick?" He spelled the name. Then he gave directions. Go 1 north, Bill's Grill. Go 3.5 miles through Gilbert. Turn right. Last dirt road before you come to the stop sign at 2 Notch Road. Go through chain and no trespassing sign. Go 50 yards and to the left. Go 10 yards. Deborah May is waiting. God forgive us all. The call was traced to a phone at Palmetto Plaza Shopping Center in Sumter, South Carolina, approximately 50 miles from the Smith residence. He was gone. Officers drove to the location. In a wooded area in Lexington County near Gilbert, they found the severely decomposed body of a child in leaves and brush. Attached to a clump of scattered hair was a pink barrette. Deborah May's mother later confirmed she had washed her daughter's hair before leaving for work that afternoon and put 2 pink barrettes in it. That was one of them. The body was positively identified through a comparison of dental impressions and, separately, through a 6-point match of footprint tissue with ink impressions taken at birth. Dr. Irwin Shaw performed the autopsy and could not determine cause of death definitively due to decomposition, but surmised suffocation was a prime possibility. Analysis of hair samples found at the scene showed adhesive residue consistent with duct tape or masking tape. She was 9 years old. The official case file at SLED recorded her age as 9.5. From the beginning, physical evidence at the abduction sites was scarce. The only hard object of potential evidentiary value was Shari's 2-page last will and testament. Lieutenant Dawson and SLED questioned document examiner Gail Heath processed it on the electrostatic detection apparatus, the ESDA, an instrument that develops latent indented writings from paper products. The ESDA works on an opposite principle from a printing press. Instead of pressing ink onto raised letters, it fills the indentations left by previous pages with graphite particles, then draws an imaging film tight over the document to render those impressions visible. In this case, the question was what was written on the pages of the legal pad directly above the sheet Shari used to write her final letter. If anything was written there, the pressure of the pen would leave impressions on her sheet. The ESDA product revealed a series of faint impressions on the first page of the testament. There were what appeared to be entries in someone else's hand, partial words and numbers. According to Shuler's account, the impressions included what appeared to be mother, uncles, Bob, beef sticks, tomatoes, and, critically, partial telephone numbers. The SLED examiners were able to make out what appeared to be the first set of numbers in one sequence, 205, the area code for Alabama. The next 3 digits were 837, which was the exchange for Huntsville, Alabama. Only 3 of the final 4 digits were legible. Working through the 9 digits they had, investigators called a Huntsville number and asked whether the party had any relatives in South Carolina. The man said yes, his mother and father lived in Saluda County. Their names were Ellis and Sharon Shepard. The Shepards lived 15 miles from the Smith home. Telephone records indicated that some of the calls to the Smith family traced to phones at their residence and to a line associated with Sharon Shepard's business. Authorities established contact with the couple on the evening of June 26. They were almost immediately dismissed as suspects, a married couple in their 40s traveling on vacation with no connection to the crimes. What they told investigators, however, was central to everything. Away for 3 weeks, they returned home on June 3rd. Someone was house-sitting for them. His name was Larry Gene Bell. The Shepards described Bell to investigators. A 36-year-old white male, approximately 5 feet 10, stocky build, a sort of beer gut. When they left for vacation, he wore a beard. When they returned from the first leg on June 3rd, it was gone. He told Sharon Shepard he was summarizing it. By the time they came back from the second leg on June 24, it was back. Both times he picked them up from the airport. He was thinner by about 10 pounds, and his appearance was less neat than usual. He seemed a little spacey, a little out of it. Most significantly, from the moment he picked them up, all he wanted to talk about was the Smith kidnapping. The case kept coming back into the conversation, no matter how the Shepherds steered away from it. On the drive to the airport for their second departure, Sharon Shepherd said he was driving her crazy. Every time we tried to change the subject, he would start again. She told Ellis on the plane that Larry was driving her insane. When they returned on June 24th, he picked them up again. After delivering their bags, he packed his things and said he was spending the night at his parents' and would return in the morning to work with Mr. Shepherd. The investigation narrowed rapidly through the night of June 26 and into the early morning hours of June 27. The Shepherds were played recordings of excerpts from the telephone calls to the Smith family. Both of them immediately identified the voice as that of Larry Jean Bell. Sharon Shepherd broke into tears. Ellis Shepherd gasped. Before leaving the sheriff's department that morning, the Shepherds gave consent to search their residence. Inside, Mrs. Shepherd found the sheet of paper she wrote notes and telephone numbers on for Belle. The list of contacts, including her son's number in Huntsville, Alabama, the number that came through indented on Sharry's last letter. The number on the Shepherd document was 205-837-1848. A transparency of the Shepherd document was superimposed over the ESDA product of the last will and testament. The partial impressions matched. Lieutenant Dawson and Agent Heath positively determined that the Shepherd document rested on top of the sheets from which Sharry wrote her letter. The impressions of the Shepherd notes pressed through to Sharry's page. Only one person had access to the Shepherd's house and their legal pad during the weeks they were away. The search of the Shepherd residence produced additional physical evidence. Sled agent Ken Haben found hair throughout the guest bedroom and bathroom. 6 hairs recovered from the bathroom and from the floor of the bedroom doorway were later compared by sled chemist Earl Wells to known hair samples from Sharry Smith. 3 hairs from the floor near the bedroom doorway were consistent with Sharry's head hair and carried tissue tags, meaning they were pulled out by force. 1 pubic hair from the same area was consistent with Sharry's pubic hair and also appeared forcibly removed. Hair from the bathroom rugs was consistent with Sharry's head hair. The commemorative mallard duck stamp on the envelope matched a sheet of the same stamps found in Ellis Shepherd's desk drawer. In Bell's car, the 1978 Buick Riviera he drove before the abductions, investigators found a license plate in the trunk reading DCE 604. Inside a wax paper envelope with a registration card confirming it as the vehicle's actual plate, the plate on the car read OCH 241, a different plate altogether. A search of Bell's bedroom produced a bag of women's silk bikini underwear similar to the adult pair found pulled over Deborah May Helmick's cotton children's underwear when her body was recovered. Bell was born October 30th, 1949, in Ralph, Alabama, the middle child of 5, 3 sisters and a brother. The family moved frequently during his youth. Between 1965 and 1967, he attended Eau Claire High School in Columbia, South Carolina, then followed his family to Mississippi, where he graduated and received training in electrical work. Back in Columbia at 20, he married a 16-year-old girl. They had a son. A Marine enlistment in 1970 ended the same year when he accidentally shot himself in the knee while cleaning a weapon. In 1972, the family moved to Rock Hill, South Carolina. The marriage ended in divorce in 1976. His criminal history before 1985 was documented in both the court record and Shuler's account. In October 1975, while on probation for an earlier offense, he approached a woman in Columbia, showed her a pistol, told her he was armed, and attempted to force her into his car. but she struggled free. In June 1976, he pleaded guilty to assault and battery of a high and aggravated nature, receiving a 5-year sentence, and served approximately 2 years before parole. A 1976 psychiatric report from the institution noted, "The chance of him repeating his acts is very high." Evaluations around this period diagnosed a psychosexual personality disorder and flagged him as a danger to women. In 1979, in Charlotte, North Carolina, a conviction followed for making obscene phone calls to a 10-year-old girl over a period of months beginning in February of that year. The girl's mother obtained a recording device from authorities, and his voice was captured on tape. A guilty plea brought a 2-year suspended sentence and 5 years probation. At various points in the following years, he admitted himself voluntarily to mental health facilities on at least 2 occasions. He worked as an electrician, including for Ellis Shepherd, and was house-sitting at the Shepherd property for 6 weeks before his arrest. FBI Special Agent John Douglas, one of the founders of the Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico, was consulted on the case beginning June 3rd, the day the first letter was intercepted. In his account in When a Killer Calls, Douglas described the profile his unit developed as that of a white male, previously married but not currently so, mid to late 20s to early 30s, with a history of sex crimes, and likely with some background or employment in electronics. The voice distortion Bell used on the calls was identified by the FBI's Signal Analysis Unit as having been accomplished by a variable speed control device. The profile also held that the caller was reading from a script, evident from the moment he corrected himself mid-call about Sherry's time of death. On the afternoon of June 27, after Bell's arrest, investigators arranged for Dawn Smith and her mother Hilda to meet him in a room at the Lexington County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Metz, Solicitor Donald Myers, Douglas, and other officers were present. The moment Bell spoke, Dawn and Hilda recognized the voice, the same voice that was in their home for 4 weeks. Bell greeted them and said that this person sitting here could not have done this ungodly thing. When I click on that reason, I'll let your family know. Dawn told him she recognized his voice, that she knew it was him, and asked if he recognized hers. He deflected. Mrs. Smith's final words to Bell at that meeting were, "Even though I sit this close and look at you, and know you're the man that called my house, I don't hate you. There is not enough room in my heart for more pain." During the interview, Lieutenant Jim Skeet Perry and investigators played recordings of the calls. Bell listened and periodically said, "I don't believe I did this." When Perry told him about the legal pad evidence that the indented numbers on Sherry's letter would be traced to the Shepherd document, that only he had access to, Bell replied, "I know for a fact that y'all wouldn't have me here without evidence and stuff. I can't confess for somebody else, and I don't want this Larry Gene Bell to be executed for some—" He did not finish the sentence. He said repeatedly, "This Larry Gene Bell didn't do it. It's the bad Larry Gene Bell." He was not claiming innocence outright. He was providing himself a dissociative frame, one that Douglas later described at trial as a face-saving scenario that investigators were briefed to offer him as a way of eliciting an admission. Larry Gene Bell was indicted by a Lexington County grand jury on August 8, 1985, for the kidnapping and murder of Sherry Faye Smith. He was indicted separately by the same grand jury on September 4, 1985, for the kidnapping and murder of Deborah May Helmick. Both indictments carried notices of the death penalty, if convicted. The first trial, for the murder and kidnapping of Sherry Smith, was initially scheduled for Saluda County in November 1985. After 2 days of jury selection made clear that impartiality was unachievable in that close-knit community, Judge John Hamilton Smith moved the trial to Monk's Corner in Berkeley County, 127 miles away, with a new date set for January 27, 1986. Defense attorney Jack Swerling was admitted to the hospital with a severe bronchial condition when the date arrived. The trial was postponed again to February 10, 1986. Bell's conduct in the courtroom was a recurring disruption throughout the proceedings. On the first day, he arrived wearing a button reading, "I am Larry Gene Bell. I am not guilty. I am the Walrus." During testimony, he stood on the stated grounds that there were no chairs at the gates of hell. From the witness stand, he proposed marriage to Dawn Smith. He described receiving visions from God and invoked the Sabbath to interrupt closing arguments, at which point Judge Smith had him removed and allowed the trial to continue in his absence. The defense, led by Swerling, argued Bell was mentally ill, not legally insane in the sense of not knowing right from wrong, but mentally ill in a way that should affect the verdict. Multiple psychologists testified to schizophrenic behaviors and periods of psychosis. The state called its own experts, who testified that Bell understood right from wrong, and that his acts were deliberate. Dr. John Dunlap, a psychiatrist called by the defense, acknowledged under cross-examination that Bell knew legal right from wrong and could control his actions, stating, "He does what he wants, when he wants, to whoever he picks out to satisfy himself." John Douglas testified for the prosecution regarding Bell's demeanor and lucidity at the time of his arrest and in the immediate post-arrest interviews. He was very lucid, very rational, very articulate, and was interested in talking to law enforcement, Douglas told the court. He also testified that Bell had, through the face-saving scenario technique, essentially admitted responsibility. He confessed guilt by saying that the bad side of Larry Gene Bell may have done this crime. Solicitor Myers's closing argument for the guilt phase focused on the letter itself. He addressed the jury and held up the pen recovered from the shepherd's house, the pen that, according to the forensic evidence, made the impressions found on Sharry's last pages, and told them that if Sharry Smith had the fortitude and courage to write out her last will and testament, each of them should have the courage to sign their name on a death penalty verdict. The jury needed 47 minutes to convict Bell of first-degree murder and kidnapping. According to Shuler, both verdicts were announced before the jury retired for sentencing deliberations. After 2 hours and 15 minutes of penalty phase deliberation, the jury returned a sentence of death. The second trial, for the kidnapping and murder of Deborah May Helmick, was moved from Lexington County to Pickens County in upstate South Carolina, 120 miles from where the crimes occurred, due to the statewide publicity generated by the first trial. It began March 23, 1987. Swerling again represented Bell, and again the defense centered on mental illness. Bell entered the Pickens County courtroom in a far more subdued state than he had in Berkeley County, remaining silent as he passed reporters and cameras. The central evidentiary dispute was the admissibility of evidence from the Smith case, the phone call recordings, the manner of death, the forensic similarities in the Helmick trial. Judge Lawrence Richter ruled that such evidence was admissible under the common scheme or plan doctrine, as the Supreme Court of South Carolina later confirmed in State v. Bell in 1990. The similarities were extensive. Both girls were blonde and blue-eyed, abducted in broad daylight in late afternoon on a Friday from in front of their homes. Directions to both bodies were given by Bell, beginning with the phrase, "Listen carefully." Both directions referenced God. Both bodies showed evidence of duct tape. Adult silk underwear was found on Deborah May's body, consistent with Bell's disclosed sexual activity with Shari, and all contact regarding both crimes was conducted through the Smith family. Ricky Morgan testified that the man he saw take Deborah May was the same man he later recognized when Bell's photo appeared on the television news. He identified Bell in the courtroom without hesitation. Ellis and Sharon Shepard testified again to Bell's obsession with the Smith case and his behavior before and after their return home. The jury convicted Bell of murder and kidnapping on March 27, 1987, after a relatively brief deliberation. 3 days later, after the penalty phase, they returned a sentence of death, the same sentence he had already received for Shari Smith's murder. At the moment Judge Richter read the sentence for the Helmick murder, "You shall suffer death by electrocution in the manner provided by law," Bell was escorted out of the courtroom in silence. His parents were not present. Swearling had sent them home. After Bell was placed in custody, a correctional officer at the Central Correctional Institution recorded that Bell made statements voluntarily during a transport to the Richland County Courthouse. Among them was a reference to a missing woman named Sandy, later understood to mean Sandy Cornett, who had disappeared from Charlotte, North Carolina. Bell wanted Charlotte officers brought in. God would reveal to him the location of her body. Charlotte Police Department investigator Larry Walker came to Columbia on July 14, 1985, and met with Bell, who described landmarks and locations, some of which officers later verified as accurate. In Walker's account, as presented at the Smith trial, Bell said he held Shari's head and gave her water, that her eyes were closed when she died, and that afterward he cleaned everything up, put it in a green dumpster, returned to the Shepherd house, and took a long, cold shower. Multiple times during the interview, Bell told Walker, "I am the most gifted man in the world, because God zaps things down to me and is using me to bring messages." No remains of Sandy Cornett were recovered. One detail investigators returned to throughout the case was Bell's own slip in the June 4 call, his correction of the time Shari wrote the letter, moving from 3:10 a.m. to 4:58 a.m. and then pausing. The working interpretation was that he was reading from a prepared script and lost his place. If 4:58 a.m. was the accurate time, the one he actually recorded in his notes, then Shari died approximately 2 hours after writing the letter and roughly 12 hours after her abduction at the mailbox. Whether that reconstruction was accurate could not be confirmed at autopsy due to the state of decomposition. All of Bell's state and federal appeals were exhausted by 1996. The South Carolina State Supreme Court set October 4, 1996, a Friday, as the execution date. Governor David Beasley declined to grant clemency. Last-minute appeals to the State Supreme Court and the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals were denied on October 3rd. In 1995, South Carolina changed its preferred execution method from electrocution to lethal injection, giving inmates already on death row the choice. Bell chose the electric chair. According to Shuler, he stated that it was made from the same true blue oak as Jesus Christ's cross and was a direct line to the throne of God. During the competency proceedings that preceded the execution, one expert testified that Bell told him, "I didn't kill those girls. I just hid them in God's secret place." A prison social worker said other death row inmates wanted to kill Bell because he smeared feces on his cell wall and refused to flush his toilet, claiming it was holy water. After 3 days of hearing testimony, Judge David Maring ruled Bell competent. He understood why he was tried, understood the nature of his punishment, and could rationally communicate with his lawyers if he chose. Maring said he doubted Bell's insanity was ever genuine, and described it as an act. As evening fell on October 3rd, death penalty supporters gathered outside the Central Correctional Institution in Columbia. Witnessing the execution for the Smith family was Hilda Smith's brother, Rick Cartrett, who told observers he expected nightmares, but said he was doing it for Shari. Deborah May Helmick's mother was also present as a witness, despite some procedural controversy, because the execution was technically for the Smith murder rather than the Helmick murder. Bob and Hilda Smith did not attend but were at the facility that night. When they saw Deborah May's mother, they embraced her and said, "I'm so glad you are doing this for the girls." Larry Gene Bell was executed in the electric chair at the Central Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina, in the early hours of October 4th, 1996. He was 46 years old. He was the last person executed in South Carolina's electric chair. According to Shuler's account, the partial indentations on the document fell almost directly beneath Shari's words. "For Jesus, some good." She wrote those words to tell her family that some good would come out of what happened to her. Directly underneath them, invisible to the naked eye, was the number that led police to the man who killed her. Bob Smith later said, "That letter has been more closure to me than any kind of closure the courts could do for me. Just that fact that she knew where she was going, and she had that kind of faith."